All right. Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today, Words for the Wise, a panel discussion. My name is Greta Dieter, and I am the Glakuho Technology Coordinator from Western Illinois University and your technology moderator for today's webinar. Before we begin the webinar, a few housekeeping items to go over with you. Should you experience any problems, please type in the chat box, and we will work to assist you. At the end of the session, the presentation and audio recording will be available on our website, glakuho.org, under the Webinar Archives resource for your future reference. We encourage you to share this resource with your colleagues who are unable to attend. I will now hand it over to Dave, the Illinois State Delegate, to get us started today.
Awesome. Thank you, Greta. All right. Well, congrats is in place first for our soon-to-be grads. As you embark on your first full-time roles, we wanted to gather as the semester comes to a close with some folks that have been in the game for a minute to share some advice as you embark on this new journey. We also know that there could be some folks that are here that are going for bachelor's level positions. So you're finishing your undergrad degree and going straight into a hall director role or an entry level role in housing or student affairs. And so hopefully all can take away from today's session. So I'm very excited. My name is Dave Arnold. My pronouns are he, him, his. I work at the University of Illinois for University Housing as the Assistant Director for Inclusion and Talent Development. So a unique role and one of the few university housing departments that I have found across the country that have a unit like this. So primarily my role is focusing around strategic DEI efforts and talent and development for the professional staff in university housing here in Illinois. So I'm very excited. Today's webinar I'm hosting as part of my role as Illinois State Delegate. And so I would like to introduce you, the folks I identified as panelists all hold mid and senior level roles in housing departments across the state of Illinois. And so would love for them to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get into some questions. So if we could, panelists, if we could start Mallory with you, and then Kiana, and then Zach. Introduce yourself, your name, pronouns if you're comfortable sharing, your current role, and then if you want to share a little bit about your path or story of how you got where you are now.
Yeah, sure. Welcome, everybody. My name is Mallory Sedaris. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of University Housing at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. I'm in my 16th year here. I have started my housing career at SIUE and have been in a variety of roles before I started as the director in January 2020. Which was unique timing to what was happening in the world just a couple months after that. I do have a somewhat non-traditional background. I was involved in campus activities in undergrad, and then was a marketing and communications major and was looking to use those skills in higher education, which is what landed me in housing. And then I caught the housing bug and stayed in that space through really the operations side. I completed my MBA whenever I was working full time. So I did not have a traditional undergraduate experience, graduate experience, and then move into a live-on position. I've had the pleasure to get to work with our live-in staff and our grads throughout the years in a variety of my roles in marketing and then operations, and then obviously now in my role as the director. And so that perspective has been really helpful for me. And I think there's been some really cool mutual opportunities for kind of what I see on the outside and what that looks like for maybe some of the expectations that our grads carry into their first role or what that looks like for them. So happy to be here. Thanks to Dave for asking me to participate. And I will go ahead and pass it on to one of our other panelists.
All righty. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kiana Stone. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I currently serve as the Director for Auxiliary Services and University Housing at Governor State University, which is one of our public state institutions here in Illinois. I have been here for just about a year at this point. So about a year and 5 months as of this May. And I currently oversee our housing program, dining, our ID card services, and our bookstore operations. And so, which is my first director role. I have spent my whole career actually thinking about that, in the state of Illinois, this is year 19. I'm almost out of my teenage years of the world of work. And the first time moving into into the director role. So it's been a good learning opportunity and very exciting time for me here, as there's a lot of growth and development happening at GSU. I did my undergrad and graduate work at Indiana University Bloomington, where I also identify as a first-gen college student, hailing from Gary, Indiana. So I am Glakuho through and through working my way through the region. And I also have a slight non-traditional route. My master's is in public affairs, where I did a double concentration in public and nonprofit management. But I was that go-getter student leader on campus and had a wonderful opportunity to get connected and working with residential programs and services there during my undergraduate career. And during grad school, I was a graduate hall director and liked helping and being in that learning, teaching, supporting role for our students, because we know that the work that we do, this is the class they didn't realize they signed up for, Adulting 101, and that learning continues outside of the classroom. And so really like that opportunity to work with our students in that capacity, because we see them at their highest achievement moments and also at their lowest. And so, and that may mean the educational moments right there on the spot. And so being able to work with our graduate staff as well as our professional staff has been a pretty rewarding experience to be a part of someone's larger story as they try to develop and flourish with their career trajectories.
And then, hi, everybody. My name is Zach Birch. I serve as the Director of Residence Life at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I have been in this role for just about 3 months, so I'm still relatively new in that capacity. I've been working in housing and residence life for the last 15 years. So I've bounced around a little bit. I'm originally from the Chicagoland area. I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Illinois Wesleyan University, which is probably very odd because I'm coming from a hard science background. But I was really involved on campus, and that's how I got into being a staff member and eventually going to grad school at Indiana State University, where I was a grad assistant for a couple of years in various communities there. From there, I had a fairly traditional path through campus housing. I served as a full-time hall director for 3 years at Ferris State University. After that, I moved into an area coordinator / neighborhood coordinator position at Purdue University. And then I was an assistant director for 5 years at Northern Illinois University before moving into the director role here. I think a lot about just being able to find the connections and creating opportunities for students to learn, educate. And a big part of that is being able to be with the students in their live-in time. So I talk a lot about how we need to be really critically thinking about how do we support our staff that are moving into these roles, as well as making sure that we are still having that personal touch for all these students who are coming to live with us. So I've said it a bunch in my staff right here. This is not a job that people can handle from behind a desk. This is a very student forward, student facing position that most people are going to be trying to move into. So thinking about that, that's going to be the big core of what we're doing here, is making sure that y'all are prepared to jump in and meet with students and connect with students and really enhance their educational experiences.
Thank you, everybody. So we'll go ahead and jump into questions. So my first one, and we don't need to go into a particular order. We can follow the order that we had for introductions if you choose, but really just feeling free to chime in. And not everybody needs to answer every question. So if you feel it's been captured by another panelist, that's fine as well. So my first question for you all, what are the key skills and experiences that folks should focus on developing to succeed in a full-time role in university housing?
I can kick us off. I would imagine there probably are going to be some things that we would say ditto, 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 too. And I recently have been introduced, and maybe I'm late to the game on this, but a lot of it are those people skills, are the things about how to navigate working with other folks, helping yourself and your team be successful. But for me, the first things that really popped into my mind are communication and problem solving skills. I think folks tend to believe that maybe they're a really good communicator and maybe there's areas of growth in that space. And so thinking about like the diversity of your communication in terms of the follow-up or the in writing and versus in person, and how the folks that you're working with also need to receive that, and depending on the nature of the communication, what's the best way to help folks be successful and how we're pushing that out. Making sure the bubble is big enough of who needs to know what's happening and what that looks like, to make sure people can be prepared. And so I think there's this underlying piece of also not being afraid to ask questions about the best way, especially as a new professional or as an entry-level position, is to ask about expectations. So communication for me, problem solving is another one, that taking some time to maybe work through that problem before the siren is sounded. Like, what does that look like to know when you need to do that earlier or when you can try to address that yourself? Or come to the table with, this is a problem, and either this is a solution that I think might work, but I know maybe I don't know the whole thing, so how can you help me do that? Or I have truly tried to figure this out and I'm stuck, so can you help me? Like, I think there are multiple pieces of that. And then the last thing, because there's probably a lot, but the last thing I would say is priority management. We tend to say time management a lot. I think sometimes, as in all of our roles, this doesn't go away when you're not in an entry-level role, but sometimes you can believe you're spending your time in the right place. And so then whenever expectations about other things that need to be complete are given to you, it can feel like there's no time to do that, or time management is the thing. But maybe the bigger issue is how are you identifying your priorities and the amount of time you need to spend on that? And so how does that align with like what's important right then in your department? Things about closing, admin tasks sometimes are going to take a bigger priority. There's other times where you're in a point of this semester where we know that belonging and engagement, and are you spending time with residents? That's that. And if you don't know to ask those questions, don't get yourself in a hole to think you've been doing the right thing, and then all of a sudden you realize that maybe that was kind of out of alignment. So having an idea that priority management, I think, would be high on my list as well.
In addition to all of that, I would say critical thinking is really important. So being able to take, you might be given a set of expectations, you might be given a manual. There's no way that expectations in a manual are going to cover every potential situation that you may run into as an entry-level hall director. So being able to think through and extrapolate what this looks like. So what if I'm reading a policy and it doesn't quite fit to the situation, what can I do to make sure that I'm understanding the spirit of that policy and moving that in? And I think just making sure that we're prioritizing, for me at least, time with students. Students are not to be avoided. And I understand that sometimes when you're moving into your first entry-level position, living amongst 18-year-olds may not be the most exciting thing, but you're there to do the job. You're there to help create community. And I found most success with that when you're actually part of that community. So not just being like, I'm here to administer the community, I'm here to be in the background, and you need to be part of that community. You need to be getting to know your students. You need to be working with your staff, your student staff collaboratively. You need to be able to find different connections on campus to be able to refer people. And a lot of that comes in with just being able to know what your strengths are and knowing how to utilize that to get quality face time with your students.
my colleagues have said some great things, and it got me to thinking. I am currently finishing up semester number 2 of my doctoral program because somebody thought that was a great idea. But at the time, as we get ready for closing, but I'm looking at I think I've honed in that my research is going to center around looking at first gen professionals, partly in that continuum as they look at opportunities within higher ed and within the academy and arena, and just kind of thinking about my own journey. And I'll say two things twofold that could be a challenge for new professionals, whether they are a first gen or a continuing generation student going into their first career role. It is understanding and navigating the onboarding piece. And so when I say onboarding piece, I'm thinking about, for example, in the state of Illinois, when you get your onboarding, this is the first time you may be choosing a retirement plan, you are choosing healthcare options and all of those things. And you may not have a real clear understanding of what that means, because they are going to tell you, you get this many days to choose this retirement plan, and then that's it. You're stuck with it for the rest of your life. Peace and blessings, right? And so how do you understand that, and what questions to ask? And know that that is okay. Don't sit in the sense of, yes, you're nodding your head in that 1-day orientation and think that you're supposed to cover it and have it all figured out, right? And go back, and if you need that one-on-one session, please explain this to me. Please ask some questions. Ask some questions of your colleagues. Have that conversation with the supervisor about, how do I get a better understanding of what I'm choosing and what I feel that will be potentially right for me? Because that is going to help you in the long run, choosing that healthcare plan, choosing that retirement plan, to create a better sense of priority management, right? And so being able to understand that, being able to understand how your vacation days work, how sick days work. I had to have that moment with a new professional this past year of, and his supervisor who reports to me did, of the conversation of, well, I'm going to take these days off. You have no days. You have not accrued anything yet. Well, it says I have all of these sick days. You're not sick. Okay. So that is, and understanding what that looks like. And so being able to ask the questions around how those things work. And the other piece I would say too is, that could be a challenge, is now understanding the different organizational culture and dynamics as compared to where you came from. That's going to take some time, and you need to think about, what is my role? I remember as an RD, and that has stuck with me, of trying to understand, how was my role different from my grad's role, right? And so knowing that we are doing a lot of the same functions and a lot of the same things. What does that mean? What is my role on the leadership team? When I come to those meetings and I'm sitting at the table, how should I be using my voice? Where does my voice matter most? And, being able to understand the things that are mattered, because it is not solely just about you anymore, but you are making decisions for your team, for your residence hall, for, the department, and weighing in, because that decision may work out for you, but is that the effective decision when you need to kind of take a step back from it, and being able to be a decision maker for your team or your student population, and trying to balance and figure out some of those things, because sometimes that is a challenge as you're making that adjustment, because it was about you, because you were a part of a certain we, and now you're not. And that could be a shock to the system of what that looks like, and how to shift that level of advocacy.
Thank you all. Any other thoughts before we move on to the next question? These are great. We covered a lot of ground. I appreciated the addition too of thinking about the onboarding piece. I've had this conversation with many of folks, of making sure you're thinking about your benefits. And another piece that you may think about now, I think about mental health services. If you go from being a student, where counseling service on most campuses are offered, make sure that that's something that you check out too. If you use mental health services, you may not now, but you may at some point. A lot of campuses have some sort of faculty and staff resource where there is some sort of counseling service provided at a free or discounted rate. And so, yeah, there's lots of things to consider as you make that transition. I think another piece of advice I would add before we move to the next one is making sure you're also getting settled into the community that you're moving into. Oftentimes, as we think about student affairs searches or housing searches, you're not just taking a new job. Sometimes you're moving to a new location. And so what grocery store are you going to shop at? Is there a place of worship that you need to make sure that you identify? And so, there's something important about feeling grounded in this new community that you're joining as well that can offer you some stability and begin for you to make some connections outside of your colleagues, because it's good to have friends out in the community who don't hold your same job title. So great advice, panelists. So Q, do you have more?
No, I was echoing, that was really good, because I think that when we think about it's too late when we're trying to unpack what led to the burnout, and like Mallory said, that priority management. Well, what have you done for yourself outside of this job, when you live where you work and you work where you live, right? And so it is retraining the trainer, because we train this for like our student leaders and all of those things, but we don't put that same advice to ourselves. And I think by the time it's too late, where you now are fried, it was, well, I do this, or I'm hanging out, and there's nothing wrong hanging out with your coworkers, but sometimes you need to be able to have that balance to step away. And that is real. We're creatures of habit when we're in grad school, we're in a cohort, because you move like one amoeba, whether that is big because you're in the same graduate program, or because usually the housing grads are sometimes a large group, then they're always together. And so if things are in conflict, because it will happen, or you need a break, then it can feel very isolating. So then being able to challenge yourself to do that early, I think, is really good.
Yeah, excellent. All right, let's move on to our next one. So the next question is around challenges that folks may face. So what challenges do new professionals often face when transitioning from being a student to being in a full-time position in housing? And how can they navigate these challenges effectively?
The first thing that I thought of with this is knowing how to set appropriate boundaries, because I think that's the big thing. When you are a student or a graduate student, you're kind of the focus of a lot of the institutional resources at that point. So you're able to say, you know what, this is what the university says we could do. This is X, Y, and Z. When you take on that full-time position, you are now part of that university. So you need to be able to understand what that looks like. So there are a lot of policies that you need to be aware of, particularly when it comes to any kind of relationship with people that you have any kind of power over. And there's ethical considerations with that as well. So the way that I have framed it for staff for years at this point in time is that it's great that you can be friendly with your students, but because you're now in a professional role, you can't be real friends. So thinking about that, you need to be able to say, do I have people come over to my apartment? What does that look like? What are the perceptions that can have? There's a lot of the ethical considerations with if there's any kind of potential or rumored relationships that are developing. Is that creating favoritism? Is that allowing for people to get special treatment, or people getting out of that? So thinking about all these things, I think boundary setting is really important for that, as well as to what Kiana was saying earlier, just making sure that we're setting ourselves up for success in those capacities. I think a lot about moving things in that capacity so that we can understand when we're tapping out and what that's going to look like. With graduate positions, a lot of that time is really flexible. So you're working 20-ish hours a week. You might be able to say, I'm going to be coming in X, Y, and Z days because that makes sense for my schedule, and that's when I don't have class. When you're in that full-time position, a lot of offices are going to be open 8 to 5. So how are you going to be able to balance that? It might not have those evening or afternoon commitments due to class, but you need to be able to practice being in an office for less longer periods of time. And if you're needing to have that extra flexibility, how are you advocating for yourself? So understanding that, in a traditional hall director role, you can go home at 5 o'clock, but if you're on call, you're going to still have to answer those phone calls. You might have things that are taking several hours at night. Does your department allow for any kind of flexible time, or are you able to get that time back in a different capacity? What does that look like? But also when you're not on call, what does that look like? Are you able to say, you know what, I'm going to turn my phone off for a night? It's scary, I know, but being able to say, we're done. I'm going to take 24 hours just to be away from campus and doing what I need to do so that I can recharge my own battery and make sure that my boundaries aren't being violated in those capacities. I also think a lot about as people are transitioning from being a student to being full-time, there's different ways that we need to think about how we can advocate for students and the student experience. So thinking about if you are choosing to be politically active and going to protest X, Y, or Z things, there are restrictions on what that looks like. So can you do that during your business time? Probably not. You probably need to take time off for that or go on your lunch hour, and thinking about what those look like. But also, you are a spokesperson for the university. So what you are doing, students are going to perceive as this is what the university is saying. So being able to think about that and present that in a way that makes the most sense for you as an individual, as well as for the place that you are working.
Exactly. Thoughts from others, challenges.
Real brief. I think you kind of touched on this. I think just anytime you move into a new role, you have to figure out your identity in that role and what that looks like. And maybe you're doing that at a new institution. Maybe you're doing it at the same institution, which I think can be even more challenging. And so really, what does that look like? And we've kind of touched on that, but that culmination of figuring out like that's all those things together. What is my role? How does that fit into the bigger picture? I now have to kind of get the bigger picture, like that mid-level, like you're at that beginning of that mid-level space where you're also having to communicate decisions with student staff, and then talk about student staff concerns to your mid-level supervisor. And so those things I think can add some compounded challenges, particularly when that's the first time you're having to do that as a professional. As you move through your career, that becomes a little bit more fluid. Like you have some experience navigating that, what that looks like. The first time that probably means getting some support and asking questions and observing how those around you do it and how do people, what's that culture there? So kind of all those things that we've touched on, I think all fit into that same pocket.
Great thoughts. Yeah, I think one of the things I think about is how folks can sometimes when you move into these new professional roles, just the different titling, the acronyms, the process is slightly different. That can really jar some new professionals, right? And so being able to accept new processes and acronyms and titles as not a threat to what you know or how things have been done, but really an opportunity for you to learn and kind of grow in that. I think one of the things I see in both what Zach and Mallory said too is sometimes new professionals will want to bring ideas pretty quick, and really the ideas that they're bringing is just how they did it at their previous place, which sometimes could fit. But being able to go on a listening tour and spend some time listening and understanding your role in the environment that you're in, and being able to bring ideas with confidence. We most certainly want folks to be confident and ready to go. But also show that you've taken the time to learn where you're at. Q, do you have thoughts?
I was gonna say to what you said, sometimes it's hard you have spent 2 years really developing your leadership style, supervision style, whatever your moniker is. And you may get to a place and it's incongruent with the culture and the environment. And you may need to negotiate what that looks like, that, this is part of the culture. I am ironclad that this is how I am. You talk to me from this time to this time and that's it, or I'm only showing up to A, B, and C and that's it, where the culture may not speak to that, where you may have to negotiate what some of that looks like, and being able to have that conversation with your supervisor, because you could kind of set yourself up, and then folks aren't finding you approachable and all of those different things, and you can kind of get into some different kind of situations. And so being open, I think, to being adaptable of what is within reason, to be able to expand how you do things to how things are being done. And as you get more settled, being able to understand the why of things are the way they are, why they're doing, what the purpose is, so understanding the purpose, I think, can then sometimes be helpful to kind of set you up for success.
Excellent. Thanks, Q. Other thoughts on challenges before we move to our next question? Cool. Thank you all. One thing that wasn't mentioned, but I did want to highlight it, it was mentioned a little bit. Zach talked about, if you wanted to be, participate in activist activities. Another thing that I would just say, if you're not staying in the state of Illinois, being aware of the state that you might be moving into, and that sometimes politics, both local and state, will drive even how we name all gender restrooms, or what certain initiatives are a go, or things that we proceed with caution. That may not totally speak to the priority and passion that your department has, but some of the governing restrictions, especially if you're going to a public institution, depending on the state that you're entering into. And so, sometimes our college campuses and the towns that they sit in are more progressive and wanting to move the needle in the way of inclusion, but it is something to keep in mind as you think about how you might move across the country in different states. So. All right, my next question is, in your experience, what are the most important aspects of building strong relationships and collaborations within a university housing team, especially for our new professionals?
I feel like I would expand on some of the things we just said about challenges. Like, getting to know those people is probably one of the challenges and one of the things that can be incredibly rewarding. So be an active listener. It takes time. You have to get out of your office to go meet other people. Understanding the culture, like our institution, facilities management is a part of our team. So university housing is made up of residence life, operations, and facilities management, which means as a res life staff member, you're calling our plumbers in the middle of the night. You know what I mean? And so those relationships and knowing them outside of moments of immediate need really add value. Understanding what they do helps you be a good partner. Like, believing that people have a reason sometimes why things are a certain way, and if you really need to push on that, what does that look like to do that in a way that's collaborative and not that really is curious. So I think those kind of asking those questions and spending time with people really will help move you forward outside of your immediate bubble.
I definitely agree with what Mal said. I think couple of things that kind of, in terms of tools in your toolbox, looking to see how you can further develop your emotional intelligence, and so thinking about that, as well as that conflict resolution. You may have been shielded to some of the parent level or outside stakeholder level conversations, and now you are in the hot seat and you can't clap back, even though you want to, in the same way, when the person on the other end of the line is coming in hot, and so having to remember that you are represented, even a higher representative of the university, and that can be a lot, and so knowing that, being able to understand how to use a higher level of soft skills patience, and being able to add value to what they're saying and processing that, I think could be something that can be very helpful when we look at like our campus partners, our stakeholders, working with our parents and working with our students. I think can sometimes be a lot, especially in the moment of crisis when we are often in that first responder kind of role, and things are moving very quickly. I would also say being able to demonstrate your level of reliability and follow through. Because again, you want these opportunities, and that's what I hear often from professionals. I want these opportunities. I want to be able to have a flourishing resume. Okay, but you can't get your duty log turned in on time. And so, or I'm looking for you for that, for the follow up around that incident report, but you want to go sit on this committee. Here we don't. That is not where we're at. So, like, let's dial it back. And it's those little things and those little moments. So that is how you get the coins in the bank, to then be able to when it's time to kind of cash in on other opportunity. It's going to be those little things that are going to take you far.
Powerful feedback. Yeah, I think thinking about relationship building from how we even do our administrative work. There's a lot in what you just said, Q. I think back to my time as a grad with Josh Lowry, my second year. Josh said, even if it's not important to you, it's important to somebody. And so when you have administrative staff members that are waiting on this administrative thing, sometimes that can impact the relationship. You're withdrawing from that relationship. If they're always having to wait on you, you're always on the list. It can impact the relationship. So powerful advice.
Because there
Mallory,
is a list.
yeah.
I think there is a list. As someone who came from the ops side,
Yeah.
understanding those relationships, the one always asking the questions of like, so tell me how do you handle the administrative tasks of your job? I often laugh whenever, and this is probably like, well, I just feel like I do a lot of administrative stuff. I'm like, I'm the director of this department. And you should know that about 50% of my day is administrative in nature. Like those tasks don't go away just because if anything, they continue to become a bigger part of your work. And that may be something somebody needs to hear to think, oh, well, I don't want to do that. So that helps give me other direction. But I think the idea of like, be excellent at your job and we will find you other opportunities. But if you're not excellent at your job, then I will have a hard time doing that. And I think probably most folks would say that. And sometimes that's hard if that doesn't align with something you're really excited about at the time. But those things will come back around. And typically directors and mid-level folks are in positions to provide opportunity, but we will look for those in spaces where somebody's being excellent at what I've hired you to do. And I need you to do that really well for your staff and the people around you. And then we can look for other opportunities, which I think sometimes is a little hard.
Yeah. You got to take care of your own backyard.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's one of the things that I've seen a lot of grad students get very excited about. Oh, I'm full-time, so that means I can start building my resume. You need to take at least the first semester, first year to just learn what your job is. And being able to do that at a proficient, not even an excellent level, but a proficient level at first. So being able to say, I know how to do this. I've learned how to supervise. I've learned how to maintain my budget for my programmatic expenses. I've learned how to professionally handle an on-call situation. I've learned how to deal with parents. I've learned how to deal with the Office of Student Conduct when somebody threatens to sue me. Lots of things. And I think a lot of that, building on what Q and Mallory have been talking about, is coming into your position with a learning mindset. You don't know everything. You never will know everything. Being able to come in and say, and being able to ask questions and say, I don't understand what this looks like. How do I do this? Or this is what I'm thinking I'm doing. Is this similar to what you do in your work? Or when you were a hall director, what were the things that were important and how did you manage those things? Being able to have those conversations with your supervisor, your peers, it's going to really important because we're showcasing that you're willing to learn, willing to grow, willing to try things, see if they work for you, and then assess and see if we can make it better for the following time.
because everything still got to get done. You want to go and be a representative on this university divisional committee, but I'm still looking for your receipts. Where is, from the Amazon purchases you made from an event that happened a week ago? It is managing the hours, being a mastery of time, because it can't be the excuse, well, 5 o'clock came, time to go. If that is a part of your support, what's important and priorities, that you got a hard per se 5 o'clock stop. What do you move? How are you negotiating? Because then if that's a hard 5 o'clock stop, but you haven't done those administrative processes, then you can't do that, because that is a ad hoc on top of everything else that you should be doing, because then you only have the capacity to do your primary job. And that is okay, and so and that is okay for now, and so you need to think about that. And I think also thinking about ahead of time that, okay, we're given deadlines and different things like that, then being able to ask like where the negotiation is up front, because you know what your workload is, because that may not be as visible to your supervisor or your supervisor's supervisor, because your work is, as we said earlier, predicated on somebody else being able to get their work done on time.
Great thoughts. This actually is a good segue into our next question. But I want to gather any other thoughts on relationship building before we move to the next question. Okay. The only thing I would emphasize, I think Mallory kind of mentioned, don't get to know your facilities and trade staff until it's in the middle of the night and they're coming in on an on-call. Really get to know your BSW, your building service workers, your administrative staff. Those are the folks that you want to know. Sometimes in grad school, or when we're students, we want to know the people with the big titles, right? We're trying to do an internship or be on a committee with this person that holds this fancy title. But I cannot underestimate enough to you that regardless of the degree that you hold, the title you're now obtaining, that the relationship with folks at all at levels of the department and with a variety of identities, that's very valuable to you. That will carry with you. People will remember how you treated them, and not being too good to pick up a piece of trash on your way in the building. Not trying to get a grievance, but listen, if you see a soda can, you can pick it up on your way in. Be an owner, not a restaurant. So.
Don't move the chair or the table, but pick up the trash. I was going to say, Dave, I guess really quick to speak to that, participate in the departmental team building activities, social activities, or the university activities and events. Make an appearance. It may not be the function, and the music may not be your music or your themed activity, but showing up, make an appearance. You may not have to stay per se the whole time, but make an appearance, mingle, and then go, because I think sometimes I see a lot of professionals that I'm not here for friends. I'm here to do my job, and I'm here to work, and then I'm out. And so, but then when it's award season time or recognition time, then they're like, well, nobody nominated, because they don't know you. You didn't. When did you take those anecdotal opportunities to sit down and break bread? At the welcome celebration or end of the year celebration, like those are opportunities that. It gives you a twofer for some of the university things, because you get to mingle and be present with your students and your colleagues at the same time and still get off on time, right? Or if it is that one departmental event, we go into a sporting event on campus, or this activity, build that into your time. Maybe it's not going to everything, but trying to understand what is the unspoken but I should be seen, kind of things, because the folks are watching. They know who's there and who's not. And that could be your opportunity, because you showed up to said event. That person, like you said, Dave, that has the title, saw how you were making moves, and then you got that shoulder tap. I want you to come and do blah, 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 and so because they saw how you move, and you never know who is watching you or what those small, again, it's about those small moments that can take you far, you know, and it could be that one event you attended, or if it's your, like, for example, some of us are A&P, some folks are civil service. There are a lot of civil service events that happen on campus. You could go to those to help show up, or maybe volunteer to serve at the civil service celebration or event or that kind of thing to support those colleagues. You know, that is another way to be able to make those connections. Like, how can you support?
Yes, absolutely. Zach, did you have a thought?
I think it's going to echo a lot of what Kiana was saying. I think it's important to know your partners throughout your time, because a lot of people are going to have various asks. And if you're able to get some of that social capital by investing, sitting down for coffee, just asking people about their careers, it's going to be much easier when you're like, hey, faculty member, would you like to put on an event with me so that we can reach our students in this capacity? I think that just trying to do that investment on the front end makes the asks later a little bit easier.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, make those phone calls and by the way, right? I always start out with a little get to know you. How's the grandkids? Oh, by the way, can you help me with this? Right? That extra 5 minutes can really pay dividends. Thanks, Zach. All right, so we're coming close on our time. So let's move to some parting advice for our grads here. You know, the student chase, right? Whether you're graduating from undergrad, starting to roll, or finishing grad school, going to roll, you know, throughout your student experience, you're really kind of putting feathers in your hat, right? You're chasing experiences, trying to add all these things. And now they're in for the long haul of work, right? Now it's the dredge, right? It's the commute. Well, maybe not if they're live-in. It's getting their cup of coffee and walking down the hall, maybe. But this is the long haul of professional work. And so looking for advice, panelists, what advice do you have for our grad students or undergrads that are going to be starting these full-time roles in terms of professional development, networking, and beginning to build a strong reputation in the field of university housing?
I think professional development is something that is done every day. I think that everything that you do, particularly in your entry-level roles, can really help you learn skills that'll be important throughout your career. And a lot of it is going to be the content knowledge that you'll be trained on. So how do I do Maxient? How do I do StarRes? How do I do RoomPact? That's going to be great and transferable as you're moving through your career. But then there's also just the personal qualities that you're developing in those capacities. So being able to show up on time, being able to turn things in on time, being detail oriented, understanding that your work affects other people, understanding that other people are affecting how you're able to do your work. All these conversations that you're having with parents and other stakeholders, asking people to assist with programmatic stuff. All of this stuff is going to be really important as it sets you up. So coming in and thinking about that, going to conferences, going to events, it's great if it can happen. But if you're doing that, making sure that you're able to take what you're learning there back to your campus and articulate that, because having the department invest money into you to go somewhere, if you're not being able to put that into your practice, it's kind of a waste of those departmental and student funds. So we want to make sure that we're constantly bringing things back. And then being able to think strategically in terms of what competencies we're developing. So I've set up some professional development plans for my team where we're starting to think about what are the competencies that we want everyone to focus on this year. And everyone gets to choose their own and then figure out how they want to get there, and then continuously follow up with the supervisor, with a mentor, with somebody, so that we're continuously seeing that improvement, because it's a competency-based model. We're never going to fully get that. It's not a checkbox. It's more of a, how am I seeing myself grow? And I think that's where I want to see professional development for a lot of our entry-level staff, is how am I seeing myself grow through this position so that I can be a stronger hall director? How can I be a stronger community director? And then being able to reflect and implement what I've learned back into it for the future.
Good. Thanks, Zach.
I think so much of what we talked about kind of builds up into the thing. I would also say enjoy it. Like you're in a job where you get to hang out with college kids and you get to help them feel like they belong, and you get to create an experience that is very unique. No one's going to know what your job is outside of this field anyway. So no one's going to understand what you really do. And so don't spend too much time getting hung up on what it means outside of our space, but enjoy the fact that this is the career path that you're on right now. And that doesn't mean it won't change. You're probably very early in your career, but embrace the opportunity that you have right now, and an opportunity and a position that typically is going to afford you a lot of opportunity to grow in a lot of those people skills. And so take advantage of that. And that aligns with some of that time and priority management, being detail oriented, and also focusing on the care of the student that's in front of you, who you're walking with them as they're managing something that's really challenging and hard. And so, and also getting to celebrate with the kid who did really well in their class. I mean, like, I have little kids at home, and their excitement about things is not always terribly different from the excitement of a student that it happens to feel really good about doing well in a class that's been hard. So kind of embrace where you're at, and the opportunities that you have to do that well. And then if you want to keep doing it, that those opportunities in a lot of spaces will present themselves if you continue to show up in that kind of whole way of knowing that it's really not just the, well, I'm really good. We do ask you to do a lot. Like, it's a position that you are being asked to be a little bit of a jack of all trades. So be prepared to do that, and then be prepared to ask the questions to get the support you need if you need clarity, or if you need to know what that looks like, and then be willing to do it and take some of those risks. So we live in a wonderful housing region. Glakuho is a great resource. Akuhoi has a lot of great competency resources. Like, you can go on the website and you can look at things as an entry-level professional that the profession has really identified are competencies that you should start to try to attain. So those resources are available to you. I would encourage you to take advantage of those, regardless of maybe how the institution that you're at is able to support professional development. There are some things out there at kind of different points, things like this. Engaging in this way with Glakuho is a great way. And so knowing that there's a lot of resources out there besides maybe attending one big conference, like, what does that look like to grow professionally and dig into those things throughout the year, and to give back in different ways. I would be remiss to not mention that I have found that in giving back, I get a lot more out of those experiences. I know that can feel like a capacity thing. I know that sometimes that's not possible, but serving on a committee, being a volunteer, finding ways to have deeper relationships in those professional development experiences, to me, have really been very fulfilling. And I think for most of staff that we've had that have engaged in that way have really benefited from that as well. So once you get in there and get your feet wet a little bit, there is some good opportunities and ways that are pretty low in stakes, low involved. Like, we're not asking like tons of time, that can really create space for you to get know folks from other schools and expand your network. And there can be a lot of benefit in that as well. Sorry, that was all over the place.
I know we need to end right on time today. Any final thoughts, Q, from you?
Really quickly, understand how the machine works. And so what I mean by that is, we can get really focused on just my residence hall, just my department, just my job and the students and all of that. But you are a small piece of a larger system. And there, you need to understand how, beyond just pushing this one button, what do the rest of the buttons do? And easy ways to do that, we have our annual divisional meetings that may happen, the state of the university meetings, attend those. because that does impact you, that does impact your role, and it'll help you better understand the impacts it means on your department so that you could ask better questions, because you'll ask the why we can't, or why this, why that. But do you have any idea what the numbers of enrollment look like? What does that mean for our bottom line, for our department? What does it mean to be an auxiliary if your department falls in our auxiliary system? And how your director is looking at the budget, and sometimes we got to give money back to the university, and so then that means that this may look different for how this impacts what you can and can't do. And I think I wish somebody would have told me that earlier on, especially if you have aspirations to be a director one day. I did start doing that, but it was by year 2, year 3, I got my feet a little more wet into that. So it could better be a part of my practice now, because I hear a lot of professionals say, I want to be the president or this and that. Well, to show up where they're at and understand how the machine works, I think is really helpful. And, yes, Glakuho, no, we'll see you in Fort Wayne, right? And program proposals are going to be due on June 20th. Check out the website. I would be remiss if I did not say that, being on the host committee. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Appreciate all the insight. You can find contact information for Zach, Mallory, Kiana. Just search the university that they're at and their name, and you'll be able to find an email there. They should also be able to be identified from the Glakuho website. And so there's lots of ways that you can connect with us. Thanks so much for viewing the webinar. Good luck as you make this transition. This is worthy work. You look at folks that have been in the game for a while here. This work is worth doing. It doesn't mean that it's always easy, but it's worth doing. It's high impact work. And we need good folks as we go into the next chapter of what our industry will look like. So hope that you have a great weekend. Yes, we hope that we see you in Fort Wayne again this November for an awesome annual conference. And we'll keep these things going. So if you have any follow-up questions or would like to connect further, feel free to reach out. I send my biweekly Illinois State newsletter. Next one will be in 2 weeks, and would love to connect further. So thank you again, panelists, for being part of this. And Greta, thank you for hosting and for your tech support.